Okay, so here it is, that ubiquitous pint of the black stuff Guinness. Around the lip of the neck it says chill, open, pour, enjoy. A lot of them say chill, I'm noticing. What else does it say on the can? Established in 1759, and in 1959 is when they produced the draft version of this can with the widget in, so that was 200 years. I think that's called a bicentenary, isn't it? So that's 4.2%, 500 mils. I did notice on the pourer of it, I didn't get that huge rush of cascading that you come to expect when you get it in a bar. Now, I've never really stopped to look too much at the difference, but if you look at it when you get it poured at in a pub, you get much more cascading effect of it, and I think that's to do with probably the restrictor plate that the beer is forced through under pressure. The restrictor plate in the end of the faucet of the tap is like a perforated sieve, and it just forces all of the nitro bubbles through there and out of suspension, making that cascade effect a much more apparent. The cascade effect is an interesting thing as well. So obviously you've got 75% roughly of nitrogen gas in there, 25% of carbon dioxide gases in there. Carbon dioxide is more soluble. It will stay in the beer, in suspension of the beer, unless it is agitated out. So if you shake a bottle of beer, it'll go everywhere. That's agitating it. The whole purpose of the widget inside this can is to agitate the beer. So when Guinness make this can of beer, before they put on this lid here, there's a drop of liquid nitrogen that is dropped into the beer. As it begins to, liquid nitrogen is below freezing temperature. It's like -40 or something. As that begins to increase in temperature and come back up closer to, zero, or to match the temperature of the beer in the can, it expands and changes from the liquid nitrogen into a gas, which expands in the can, and the lid is seamed on very quickly to seal in that gas. What happens then is that you get that widget thing, wherever I've put it. Slightly different design to the one in the Murphy's, but this widget, the gases of the liquid nitrogen are forced inside the hole on the side of the widget, along with a bit of beer, and that is all sealed in with the seaming of the can. Then we put it in the fridge when we get home, and we make it very cold so that it keeps a lot of the CO2, carbon dioxide, in suspension, so it's more dissolved into the beer. And the same again, a little bit and less so with the nitrogen. Then we pull this, and what happens is the beer can depressurizes to equal the pressure of the outside of the can. Inside, before you pop this can, you'll notice that every can of Guinness is really, really tough to squeeze. There's only like the tiniest give in it at all. That is all that nitrogen built up in there, pressurized. When you release it, all of that pressure is equalized, and the widget shoots out nitrogen there and shoots out beer and goes around and around and agitates all of the gases out of suspension, creating that surge, and they call it the surge and the settle. But what happens when you pour that into that agitated beer into your glass is you get a lot of CO2 coming out suspension and going up. It leaves the side of the glass, and as does the nitrogen, and goes up to the top. When the space in the top is filled up, it can't go anywhere, so it comes back down and in on itself. That is why when you're pushing up all the gas, all of the beer is sinking, and that sinking draws down all of the nitrogen, the smaller nitrogen bubbles that are less soluble, so there's less of them inside the actual beer. They're drawn down, and that creates that really nice cascade effect. That's really what's happening in all of these nitrogenated beers, is the smaller bubbles of the nitrogen are just pulled down, and then when they do, that's the surge, and they go down and the CO2 is going up. So it's kind of like a storm in a pint glass. And then when it begins to settle, all of those bubbles do finally rise to the surface as the CO2 is rising to the surface, there's less pressure, it becomes a bigger bubble. But the smaller nitrogen bubbles drag up the proteins in the beer and the beer itself, and they stay in suspension and become tightly packed. The tulip glass aids this, as do the little wave motions on the side of this glass, and they compact together to make a tightly dense, compact head of foam. That is what happens when you open your pint of Guinness or any nitrogenated beer. It's all about that surge and settle, and it's all about the difference in the size of the nitrogen bubble compared to the carbon dioxide bubble, and the fact that nitrogen is far less soluble in liquid than carbon dioxide. And that's what creates that cool effect, and then goes to create a really nice creamy top. But the downside of this, if you call it a downside, I don't know, is that the beer is far less carbonated than any normal carbon dioxide carbonated beer that you would get off a draft pint in a pub. And that for me makes the beer a little bit thinner, and it dulls down the flavors. And you know what carbonation does for a beer in a positive sense is when you're drinking it, you're taking your slug of beer and it goes into your mouth. Well, that carbonation is popping out of suspension and giving your mouth a whole flavor experience of aromas. It's carbonic, really. It's really popping inside of your mouth and releasing aromas and flavors and taste sensations, which you get less of in a pint of nitrogenated beer, because there is more nitrogen bubbles which aren't kept in suspension or in solution of the beer. They are actually all just come to the top to make this cream on the top of the pint of the beer. I hope that makes some kind of sense. I hope I didn't waffle on too much, but that is what happens in your pint of Guinness. If I've got any of that wrong, here, go on, cheers. Tangy on the nose, far less in the way of cereal or malt, a bit earthy, a lot more mineral than the Beamish and the Murphy's, for sure. So different on the nose, that's interesting. There's something very interesting about this pint of beer. This Guinness is much lighter in colour than Beamish or Murphy's. I've been sat here, the lights are shining in, and I can notice around all the edges of the pint I'm getting coloration, but not just a bit of coloration, a lot of it. So let's dispel a myth right now. Guinness is not black, okay? It is not black in any way. It is dark and it is thick. You know, the glass is wide, so you're creating a depth of colour which, when you look through it, appears to be black. But when you get to the smaller, more narrow part of the glass, you can see at the outer edges there are a whole load of colorations. It is ruby red. It does have like flecks of hazel, mahogany, ruby red, dark copper, like bits of amber, like the last bit of a sunset kind of red. Really deep kind of red. It's very interesting. The next time you open up this beer, just realized that it's not a pint of the black stuff, it's a pint of the ruby red stuff. Anyway, that's by the by. The tulip glass, this is a classic Guinness glass, so I should say something about the glass. The glass is designed to draw that nitrogenation down as much as it can. When you pour a pint of Guinness from a draught tap, you're supposed to aim it at the harp. There's a whole different set of circumstances. The temperature has to be right. The angle has to be 45 degrees. You pour it there until it goes above the harp, and then you begin to straighten it up, put it down. Then you give it the old, like, whatever, how many seconds, 90, 120, whatever. Basically, that's the first part. The second part of the pour on a draft system, not talking about a can now, is you set it down, and instead of pulling any more of the pint, you push the faucet tap handle, and that releases more of the beer into the rest of the glass to fill it up, but less amount of gas with it. So you get the precise amount of head, which apparently is something along the lines of 18 to 20 millimeters. If you care about that stuff, there you go. Cheers, sláinte. I'm having a pint of the ruby red. Way tangier. That is a nice pint of stout. It has less roastiness than Murphy's by a country mile, and I mean it night and day. So anyone who can't taste the difference between a Murphy's and a Guinness, I don't know. Beamish now, that's a little bit sort of in between, but this one here is not anywhere near as roasty as Murphy's. And in fairness, I can only really tell that because I've just had Murphy's, then cleaned my palate. And I actually had a Carr's cracker to clean the palate after water. Same again with the Beamish. Cleaned the glass, dried the glass, cooled the glass in the fridge, and cleaned my palate out with water so that I'm not tasting more beer on top of beer, and it changes my perception of the beer. But that is different altogether. Whereas the Murphy's was blacker, the Beamish was slightly black as well. This one has coloration in it, quite a bit of coloration. And that coloration it tells me something about the malt character of this beer. So you have a whole different bunch of malted grains that can go into a beer, and they go all the way from very light color to very dark color, to keep it very simple, plain terms. The darker the color malt, the more roasted it is. And the more roasted it is, the more bitter and acrid it will be. So if you get a black patent malt, it's totally jet black, and it tastes burnt and acidic on the mouth. Contrast that with a very pale malt, and you're getting more biscuity, mellow flavors, more maltiness, a slight bit breadier. This seems to be, you know, if Murphy sits about here, and if Beamish sits about here, Guinness sits about here. So in terms of roastiness, so it really is different to Murphy's and Beamish. I'm quite surprised that I can tell the difference. Now, tomorrow you put all three in front of me, maybe I can't tell the difference, only because I've got all three in front of me and I've just tried them. This one has a tang to it. That is some of the acidity being muted by the nitrogen, the lack of carbonation, in suspension in the beer. So carbonation will make the beer more prickly and more spritzy and more effervescent, and therefore it will burst in your mouth, all that carbon dioxide inside the beer, releasing lots more perception of flavour. The flavour is still in here, but if this beer was 100% carbonated, I would get a totally different flavor perception. Whereas the nitrogen, which is far less soluble in the beer, has all come to make the big white stuff at the top. That has made, you know, the proportion of that has made the beer less carbonated and has dulled down that acidity and made it more tangy when combined with a bit more sweeter malts, let's say, from the pale malt. So that's the way I perceive it anyway. It's 4.2%. Doesn't tell you anything else about it. It does say chill, open, pour, enjoy. Keeps it simple. St. James's Gate written on the front. It's a pint of Guinness. Like it's one of the most well-known beers on planet Earth, and it comes from this incredible small little country off the edge of Europe, and it's just, you know, nobody can. You can be craft beer, you can be, or you know, you can be nerdy about it, but at the end of the day, a pint of Guinness is nothing wrong with it. And I would gladly sit with a pint of Guinness in front of me in a bar now, rather than sat at home drinking in the middle of a pandemic. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the beer. My view on this beer, actually, is really nice. Like, it just is. I wonder, is O'Hara's going to stand up to this? Let's see in a minute. Actually, let's see right now. Okay, so just before I crack into the modern day craft beer version of Nitro Stout from the Carlo Brewing Company, O'Hara's Irish Stout, I am just going to show you something that I notice about all of these nitrogenated cans. When you give them a squeeze, they are absolutely pressurized. Really strong, and that's to do with the liquid nitrogen. Now, I don't know if O'Hara's have used the same process as the other guys, but liquid nitrogen is dropped into a can of Guinness from about here, plop, and when it reaches the beer, it immediately starts to vaporize. The can lid is put on and it is sealed immediately, and then it's inverted apparently as well. I'm not sure which way O'Hara's do it, but I wanted to show you just this is Curious Society Pilsner from Larkins, I think. Anyway, if you press into the sides of a carbonated as opposed to a nitrogenated can, carbonated can you can squeeze in, nitrogenated can you cannot. You cannot. Anyway, something like that. That's just something that I've seen along the way, and I thought it was worth pointing out. Let's pop that up there for now, and let us get cracking on with something I have been dying to try. Now, I will just say around the top neck they have instructions, okay, or something. Anyway, I'm about to read it. Smooth and creamy dry Irish stout. Also in different languages as well, because they're obviously an export company. Smooth and creamy dry Irish stout. Yeah, it's 4.3% as opposed to Guinness being 4.2, but it's precisely the same basically. It does have, I haven't got the can in front of me from Guinness, but it does say chill, pull, pour, pause, and enjoy. They all seem to give you this sort of 4 or 5, you know, chill, pull, pour, enjoy kind of idea going on. And what they are basically telling you is kind of like an instruction to chill the can. The reason you need to chill a can of nitrogenated beer is to make the less soluble nitrogen gas bubbles more soluble. The colder they are, the more soluble they are. Basically, soluble just means that they're more incorporated into the actual beer itself. So if you have this and it's been left out on the side and it's really warm and you pour it in, you're going to get a really foamy slack head of foam on top. If you over chill it, you're going to get a really small head of tightly condensed foam. But if you just have it chill for 3 hours, like Guinness say to do, you're probably going to end up bang on right on the money. I really, really want this beer to be absolutely fantastic. The reason is O'Haras are a great example of microbrewery turned craft brewery turned slightly bigger than craft brewery. They're a great success story. The owner, Seamus, he's a great advocate for the craft beer world. So, you know, when we hear in Ireland that he's gone ahead and done this widget technology and put it in a can, you know, we don't want to pit it against Guinness, but in the back of your mind you kind of do, because I'd love to see some of those Guinness taps taken away and replaced with O'Haras taps, or a choice side by side. Choice is what I've always advocated with craft beer, and choice would be absolutely fantastic. Now, I will note one more thing just before I open it. It's a 440ml can. I think that's the first thing that I would like to say that I'm not sure I agree with, because it's not going to come up to the top of this purpose-built glass. And if you're having the nitrogenated experience, then isn't it lovely when you see the creamy head just popping out the top of the pint glass on your Guinness? You know, the same thing should happen with an O'Haras, but with a 440ml can, you're not going to get that. And I just want to quickly thank Davey Spain and Barry Spollen for bailing me out with this can. Cheers, lads. Okay, so the really interesting thing there was I got a very, very good cascade effect on the side of the glass. Something which, I know I poured the beers exactly the same way every time, but I didn't get that with every other beer. So that is a great, great start for the type of beer it is. Fantastic cascade pour. The beer looks really creamy on the top. I'm not sure if you can see that there, but there is a really nice creaminess on the top. Slightly tan, perfect line between the black and the white, which is, I guess, what you want in the style. Unlike the Guinness, it is a few shades darker. There are flecks of like dark mahogany, the darkest of reds, if you like, coming through. But really a slightly darker beer altogether. I'm just trying to quickly turn it around and see, but it does look fantastic. So they've achieved like a Nitro Stout, which is not an easy thing to introduce into your brewery. So it's a very interesting technology and involves a lot of moving parts. So well done to O'Haras for getting that bit up and running at least. And let's see now what this is all about. I want to do this on the top, but I shouldn't. But the only reason I can is because the can is smaller and it hasn't come to the top of the glass. I don't like that. I will say I wanted this beer to fit the whole pint glass, and I think that's a mistake from O'Haras. Maybe it's down to their canning line, maybe they're making special glasses for a 440ml version, but this is definitely not. I've heard a couple of people say maybe it is 500ml, but they've only put 440 on it. And it isn't that at all. It really is 440ml of beer, and it just doesn't sit well with me that doesn't rise to the lip of the glass. It would look so much better up there. Anyway, that's just my initial impression of the appearance, and quite a lot of what Nitro Stout is based around is the appearance. So that would be one thing that I would question. But anyway, that aside, let's try the beer. quite a muted, dull aroma, hints of maybe a tanginess. Not much, in fairness, I'll be honest and call it the way it is. Let's give it a go. Cheers and sláinte. That is different to Murphy's, it's different to Beamish, it's different to Guinness. That right there is totally different in the flavour output and the contribution from the malt. I'm going to give it another few sips before I say what I think. Okay, the mouthfeel is fantastic. The mouthfeel of this is absolutely brilliant. It really, really is enjoyable. Nice, roasty. Shares one similarity to the Murphy's in that it has that kind of texture, like a slightly powdery texture on the tongue that Beamish and Guinness don't have. I kind of like it. Hold on. This is just better. This is better than Guinness, it's better than Beamish, and it's better than Murphy's. And I'm going to tell you why. I just want another sip first. The malt contributions in this beer. Now, all of these nitrogenated beers are small malt contribution, flavour, impact. But this one has a lot. It has a lot of chocolate. It has a lot of nice roast. It's not mellow, but it's not harsh. It's in the middle. And there's like elements of coffee in here as well, which you don't get from any of the other ones. Pulling down a nice bit of foam as you go. Yeah, there's some kind of like really interesting, flavorful malt contribution going on in here. I'm trying to work out what I think of it. It's kind of a bit mocha. I think mocha is a good way of explaining it. A little bit roasty, but the roast is not like Guinness roast. It's not like Beamish. It's not like Murphy's roast. It's kind of like mocha roast. It's a mellow, subdued one, but it builds as well. The more you drink it, it's building. There's a definitely an ashen element to this beer. If you take a sip of this beer and don't do what you normally do with a Guinness, take a sip of this O'Haras Nitro and swill it round the mouth, and what happens is this like ashen effect comes across it, where they've used dark patent malt or some kind of black malt, and it really is enjoyable because what the nitrogenated gases have done is they've dulled that down to a really nice palatable flavor. Absolutely fantastic. It's kind of like a different tang. It's kind of like a more dark malt tang than a roasty acidic tang. You know, whereas in Guinness you might say things like this is like iron, this is like a real twang of mineral earthy ironness. This you get like a twang, but it's kind of like an ashen chocolate, dulled down mocha thing going on. It's really different and I really like it. I'm so excited because I think this is a contender, and I was hoping it was when I tasted when I first poured it, and I was thinking, you know, I just don't want this to be crap and then me have to give it a bad review or say, you know, it could be better or whatever. I think it's perfect. I think O'Haras have done a splendid job of making a valid contribution to the Nitro Irish Stout market, which the heritage and culture of Ireland is built upon. I can see this all over Ireland. And I can see them bringing out the red one after, the red stout, the red Nitro. Kind of subdued on the nose, bit of that cereal maltiness going on. There is a little bit of a tang to it the more you drink it, and it's kind of, I would describe it a little bit as ashen, a little bit, and that's not a negative thing, that's just a descriptor of the way that I get the malt. There's definitely some darker malts in here, and it does ring true when you think about the colour of Guinness in comparison to this. Guinness ruby red, this one darker, but smooth, really nitro, really enjoyable. Big thumbs up. That's my view on O'Hara's Irish Nitro Stout. Love it. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. Velvety smooth, silky. It's gonna put it up to Guinness. It absolutely is. O'Hara's Nitro Irish Stout. That's gonna do it. Cheers, sláinte, and it's on to the next one. Bye bye.